Alright, so welcome back here everybody. And now you can see that we're inside of Maya here. And I'm going to show you a very quick and simple way to go ahead and render out grayscale presentations inside of Maya and V-Ray. This is a method that I use personally, and it's not necessarily that complex, so definitely don't be frightened here. I just need to go ahead and set our project folder here, which is on our desktop. Okay. So the first thing that we need to go ahead and do is we need to build our scene. And I'm going to give you all the geometric files here and all the information that you're going to need here. Though I'm not going to give you the model file that I'm going to use here for presentation purposes. So let me just go ahead and import our background OBJ. This is going to be our background geometry that we're going to be using. Okay. I'm also going to go ahead and import a model here just so that we can see where this model is going to come in, and just so that we can go ahead and set the scene up here. So with that brought in, I'm going to go ahead and just scale up our background here. Go ahead and select our model. And simply just move it up here. Let me go ahead and turn on our wireframe here. Okay, so with our model brought in here, go ahead and just scale that up just a little bit more. Okay, so with our model brought in here, we need to go ahead and set up our scene. And the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do really is set up our light source. So we need an initial light source so that we can initially light the scene. And to do that, we're just simply going to come up here to our render tab, or our render settings. Just make sure that we change over to V-Ray here. And we're going to light the scene here with indirect illumination. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn on the global illumination. I'm not going to be changing any of the settings here. Everything is default. Go into the V-Ray tab, and I'm also going to come down here to the environment rollout. I'm going to override the environment, and instead of having a background texture of black, I'm just simply going to move this over to be gray. If you were rendering without a background, I would definitely suggest leaving it black, because then that way you can have an alpha channel. But this isn't where our light source is actually going to come from. Our light source is going to come from our GI texture. So I'm going to hit the checker pattern here. Go ahead and click File so we can plug in a file node here. And I will give you guys this Studio G as well, which is going to be our light source. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Open. And with that set up, I'm simply just going to move our render settings over. I'm going to pull up my render window here. And I need to just definitely scale this down here, because that comes out quite large. I'm going to go ahead and hit render here, and this shouldn't take too long to calculate out. Okay, so you can see where we get our initial light source here, and it's lit fairly well, but you can see where we definitely need a more lighting information in the scene. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead here and pull that over, and I'm also going to go ahead and create a new camera here, which is going to be our shot cam. So camera 1, I'm going to go ahead and rename this to our shot cam, just so that we can set up our shot for sure. And I'm just going to go ahead and move this over here a little bit. Come up here to View, Camera Settings, turn on the resolution gate so I know exactly what's getting rendered here. Okay. And I'm going to jump back here to our perspective cam, so we can create some lights that we need. So come up here to Create Lights, V-Ray Rectangle Light, and you can see that it comes in fairly small. Now, it should be noted that you shouldn't scale this up in the Maya perspective viewport, because when you scale it up, the intensity is going to come up as well. So what you want to go ahead and do is just hit Control A, and we're going to come down here to the U and V size, and just change this to 10. Okay, I'm just going to simply move it up here into place and to where I actually want this light. Okay, and we just need to rotate that a little bit there. I'm going to go ahead and change the intensity here to 1.25. You can always do whatever intensity that you like, but I like to use a multitude of lights, maybe 3 or 4, which includes that global illumination light. So I want to change the subdivisions here as well, because this is going to give us a more accurate lighting source. So something like 15 should be good. We want those shadows. The shadow color here we can probably do a little bit gray. Not necessarily black, because black's going to be a little bit too intense for us. Okay, so let's come down here and make sure that we turn our light to be invisible. This way it doesn't render. We're only going to get the actual lighting information. We're not going to get the light geometry of the light source or where that light's coming from. So we can turn this invisible. Okay, we can always rename this as our front light. Go ahead and duplicate this. And before I actually place this, I want to go ahead and make sure that I place the model here as well. So before I go ahead and do that, let me go ahead and just smooth mesh preview to polygons, just so I get a smooth model. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And we'll just go ahead and rotate this a little bit left. Okay, so now I can go ahead and set up our light placement here. And I think that maybe we should have it say like right there. And I can throw a little bit more intensity for this light. So maybe something like 4, which should give us a little bit more information coming in from the left hand, or the right hand side here. Okay. And I'm just going to jump back to my shot cam. Okay, and with those lights set up, I want to come up here to our render settings. And we'll jump over here to our V-Ray Common tab. And we're going to set the resolution now. Okay, so we want to turn that maintain width and height ratio off, because we're going to be using a custom size. And this is a size that I tend to use more often than not, though I have seen people render larger. But just for me personally, I like to render at 3250 by 1828. And this should give us a really large image. Okay, so you can see now where I definitely need to zoom in on the model a little bit here. Okay. I'm also going to be using the V-Ray frame buffer, because I have found that when using the V-Ray frame buffer, it tends to render a little bit faster than using the Maya window. Okay, so we'll jump back here to the V-Ray tab. Make sure that we minimize our environment tab here. Now, there are a couple different ways that we can set up our image sampler here. I tend to like to use the adaptive DMC, but for the AA filter type, I like to use the Catmull ROM. And size-wise for the anti-aliasing, a lot of people say don't use any more than 2, but for me personally, I tend to like to crank it up to about 4. This way it's going to give me a very, very crisp image when rendering. Okay, and we also need to, since that's set up, create some render elements for ourselves. I'm not going to walk you through the entire render element setup, but I'm going to go ahead here and create some render layers as well. So let's go ahead and create our render layers. So for the first render layer, we want the scarecrow, we want the light source, we want the shot cam, the scarecrow, and also the background mesh. So we'll select all of those, go ahead and create a new render layer. We're going to call this the grayscale layer. Okay, let me go ahead and move my outliner over here. Go ahead and click the Render Elements tab. Now, just for this demonstration purposes here only, I'm only going to be adding 1 or 2 different passes here, because we have to set up some materials before, once we set these up. So I only want a diffuse pass. If you want to go ahead and set up a depth pass, you can go ahead and do that. But I'm not going to do that because I don't necessarily need a depth pass for this. All I really need is the diffuse pass, and I think the global illumination pass should work. Okay, so we don't necessarily have to go ahead and change any of the settings for those. So I can go ahead here and just move this off screen real quick, so I can set up some materials here. Another big key here is to make sure that your background is a different color than your model. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and open up our hypershade here. And I'm going to create 2 different V-Ray materials. One which is going to be our background material, and 1 which is going to be for our models. Okay, so we'll select this V-Ray Material 1, hit Control A. We're going to plug a diffuse color here in, and I will give you a couple different files here. So we're going to use this lighter shade for the background, so we can just simply select the background there, go ahead and apply it. And for this V-Ray material for our models, we're just going to turn this a little bit gray, a little bit darker gray. Okay, I'm just going to leave it as a blend. Change the reflection color to completely white, but I'm going to turn the amount here down fairly low. And I'm also going to change the reflection glossiness here, and also the reflection subdivisions. A typical number that I like to use is about 25. This means that this is going to be a very, very accurate and very, very smooth material, so there won't be necessarily any noise in it. So let me just go ahead here and select our scarecrow, our second scarecrow. Go ahead and assign that material to the model. Okay, so you see where that material gets applied. And if I hit 6 on our keyboard, you can see that our color information also comes in for the background. Go ahead and just move my outliner off screen there. Okay. And we'll take a look here at our render layers. But another thing that I would like to do is use an ambient occlusion render. Okay, so we can simply just move our hypershade off here. Just select what we would want for our ambient occlusion. So I only want the background and the scarecrows. I don't want any of that lighting information to come through or be transferred over to our ambient occlusion layer. So with those 3 selected, we'll go ahead here and create a new render layer. We'll rename this as our ambient occlusion. Okay. And inside of V-Ray, you need a custom material just like inside of Mental Ray. So go ahead and clear our workspace here. Just type in dirt, so we get our V-Ray dirt material. Okay, let's take a look here at some of our settings. We're not going to change the radius and the distribution or the fall off, but we will be changing the subdivisions here to like 25. So this gives us a fairly accurate material. The occluded color here, as you see, that's black. I don't like to use a completely black color for the occluded color. I like to have at least a little bit of gray in here. So with that done, we'll go ahead here and select the objects in the layer. Simply assign the texture to the selection, and then it'll just take a second to update there. We'll also take a look here at our render elements for our render layer. We don't need any render elements here, and you can see that these turn gray from the grayscale, but you can just simply select them, go ahead and remove them. So now we don't have any associated elements with this render layer, but we still have the associated, go ahead and re-add those. Just simply go ahead and turn them off, which is fine, because we don't necessarily need these for our ambient occlusion layer, but we do need them for our grayscale render. Okay, and at this point we're ready to go ahead and render out our image. I just want to make a note that you guys will get all of this scene file, but you won't get the model file. So I'm going to go ahead here and render out our image, and you'll see here whenever I go ahead and hit render that our V-Ray frame buffer is going to come up. And once that comes up, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so that I can show you the render that cranks out. So let me go ahead and hit render here, and you can see that our My Viewport render window gets deleted and hidden. So here is our render cranking out. I'm going to go ahead and hit pause now until this render kicks out. So okay, so now that you can see that our V-Ray render has rendered out, and I haven't rendered out the ambient occlusion. You guys can go ahead and do that if you want. Let's go ahead here and save our images out, and instead of saving just one image at a time, I'm going to go ahead and hit the multiple save button here. Okay, so I can save all the images out at one time. Let me go ahead and just make sure that I save them out as a target file. Okay, and we're going to call this the render sample. color. Okay, so whenever I hit save here, it's going to save out all of the associated render elements. Okay, so with save, we go ahead and open the folder that I just saved to. Let's take a look here at our alpha. As you don't see it, because if I can go ahead and pull this down, you can see that we still have a background here. Okay, so this is basically useless, so we're not going to be using that. We can just simply delete it. Take a look at our diffuse pass here. You can see that we have basically like a shadowed information pass. Here's our global illumination pass. Here's our color pass. Go ahead and close this. I'm just going to simply go ahead here and throw these into Photoshop real quick. And this is just for demonstration purposes only. If you want to go ahead and comp these back together, just simply select your color pass just to make sure that it's over here. And we'll go ahead and drag these images onto it. So there's our diffuse pass dragged on. Okay, we can simply close that image. Let's go ahead and drag on our global illumination pass. Okay, we'll go ahead and just make sure that it's going to be in the right position there. Go ahead and turn that global illumination off. Adjust the layer style here to something that we think is going to fit well. And that's going to enhance our model a little bit. Okay, so we'll go ahead with a hard light here and just turn the fill and the opacity down here a decent amount. Take our global illumination and just scroll down to what you think at least fits best for you. So maybe see if we can try the multiply here. Okay, we'll just have to go ahead and turn this down a rather large amount because that global illumination is fairly dark. Okay, so there you can see that we have our rendered out images inside of Photoshop and Comp, and I'm going to go ahead and save this for you guys just to give you an example. So we'll call this the render Photoshop, and we'll go ahead and save it out as a PSD so that you guys can take a look at this. And you'll also notice that I left the background here locked. If you want to go ahead and unlock that, just double click it and it'll allow you to unlock it. And that is covering our grayscale rendering inside of ZBrush and compositing in Photoshop, and also our grayscale rendering inside of V-Ray, inside of Maya, and comping in Photoshop. So keep an eye on the website for more tutorials in the future, and thanks for watching.